Hi.
Hi, Tathagato. I'm Som. I'm the director of marketing for iPlot, and I'm a consultant at Merck with a PhD degree, with some time in startup, and then I decided to go for the corporate role. So thank you so much for the wonderful session today. It was really an amazing discussion with lots of insights from you. So I think this would be like a more of an informal session. And before I ask my own questions, maybe I'll ask the people who are in the room to kind of ask their questions as well. So if someone has any questions, please raise your hand, and I'll be unmuting you so that you can ask your question directly to Tathagata. Or if you want, you can put your question in the chat room as well, and we can take it from there as well. So, okay, while we are waiting for the questions, maybe to kickstart the whole conversation, I actually found Sigtuple very interesting, considering the fact that it's an AI company, but then the basis of all the data comes from a device. So you have a device which gives you the data, and then you train your models out of it and all. So you mentioned correctly that India is not really as a hub of hardware. So that's still something which we are lacking in. I mean, we have the software skills, but hardware is something which is a bit of an issue. So what is the problems with growing with such a hardware specific approach? Like, did you face any problems, and could you please share your experiences in how you overcame that as well?
Okay, so hardware, the main problem that I have is basically nothing fair. I mean, rarely anything is available in India as a raw materials. So even if I have to buy a ball screw, I have to either go to China or Japan or Taiwan. That is one of the biggest challenges that I have, that the manufacturing industry in India is still in its rudimentary stages, despite the fact that we have so many steel plants, we have so many natural resources. So that is obviously a policy question that the government needs to look at. But any startup which is trying to do hardware in India will face that challenge, because anything that we order, we want to buy, will cost more because of custom duties. It will have a long lead time because it needs to be shipped from Japan or Taiwan or China. And geopolitical conditions can throw a spanner in the wheel anytime.
Yep.
Right. So those are some of the challenges that I've faced. Second, I would say that if you see, I mean, most engineering colleges have a mechanical engineering department and an electrical engineering department. But how many students coming out of a mechanical engineering department actually want to do mechanical engineering? Many of them, and because, I mean, it's a chicken and an egg problem, because there are no good manufacturing or mechanical engineering core jobs, people tend to go into software. And because people are tending to go into software, there are less number of engineers available to do the innovative work in design and manufacturing. And maybe that is because that is the reason why we are lagging behind in the design and manufacturing industry.
So, I mean, that's actually a very valid point, and I guess we still have to break out of this whole vicious cycle. So, I mean, for all the kind of students, we have a lot of students here will be sharing the poll results. So for all the students, from maybe not IT field or kind of interested in something hardware, what would be your recommendation to them? Would you kind of ask them to maybe do internship or something during their...
No, what I think is that for people who are coming from a non-IT, say, stream, say mechanical engineering or electrical engineering comes under IT itself, but mechanical or materials or manufacturing, I would say that robotics and AI go hand in hand. So there is a lot we can do by actually combining these two. And there's a lot of interesting work that is available over here. And in Sigtuple also, we have had cases of people moving from hardware into data science. And since they bring with them the knowledge of hardware, they can actually build the data science better, which is suitable for that particular hardware. So robotics is, I mean, there is a limit to what you can do on a mobile phone, right? And taking pictures and identifying things in there has its limitations. I mean, beyond a point, it will become boring. But robotics, hardware, I mean, special purpose hardware for certain tasks, they still have a long way to go. And there's a lot of opportunities available here. I'm sure there will be a lot of Indian startups coming up in the next few years in the robotics plus AI space.
I mean, I think that's like a very interesting point that you raised, like, robotics and AI kind of go hand in hand. So, okay, for the audience, if you have any question, please don't be shy. Please, raise your hand or ask your question in the chat group here. So I think, okay, while we are waiting for more questions, I actually found it very interesting that the time when Sigtuple started, you had the whole problem with Theranos, right? Like Theranos and their Edison machine was kind of like, was a massive debacle. So while starting up, and I think like the three co-founders, you didn't really have a training or a background in the whole field. So how was your initial journey like? Like, did you face a lot of skepticism from the investors? And how did you kind of overcome it?
Good question. So when we started, Theranos was at the peak. They had a $9 billion valuation. They had Henry Kissinger on the board and so on and so forth. So I think the downfall started from 2016 onwards or late to 2015, something like that. So one thing that we realized is the reason Theranos failed, apart from the fact that the tech did not work, was because they were a black box. You did not know what is going on inside the machine. Sigtuple, on the other hand, from the day one, we have decided to be a white box. So the doctor actually gets to see the images, the visual evidence. Okay, I'm calling this cell a neutrophil. And the doctor can agree with it. The doctor may not agree with it. She can change the classification. But it is, and that is, I believe, the only way a medical AI can become acceptable to the end consumer, which is the pathologist or the doctors. One is explainable AI. You should be able to explain why you're doing what you're doing. And B, there should be visual evidence in our case or some other kind of evidence in the other case. It should be evidence-backed and explainable. And that is something which we have focused on right from the beginning, and that differentiated us from, say, the Theranos, which was anyway a fraud. But even assuming that it was not a fraud, that would have been a differentiating factor. And this is what we have, I mean, right from the beginning, highlighted to any potential investor, that this is not Theranos, even though we work with blood, but not all blood are created equal. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like looking at Sigtuple, that's the first thing which came in mind. Like, there's this whole hype, and then like a drastic fall, and then like I think the fact that you were a white box and you were very clear upfront was the way out. So I mean, would that be your recommendation to all the entrepreneurs? Like whatever they do,
absolutely, unequivocally, be as transparent, because you see, as medical AI startups, we ultimately can mean the difference between life and death. There is no credit in keeping things close to the chest. Be open, and keeping things close to the chest will also ensure that you will not be able to sell it to the real good doctors. You will be able to sell it to Walgreens, I'm sure, like Theranos did, but you will not be able to sell it to a proper doctor who's worth his salt, his or her salt. So being transparent, being a white box, being explainable, being evidence-backed is the key for any medical startup.
Yeah, I think that's something which the audience should note about their own startup or their startup journey as well. Okay. So yeah, but coming to that, I think there's another interesting question which I think we saw in some of our previous events as well, that right now you have the startups and then you have the big tech, and big tech have also figured out like, how valuable the whole healthcare sector is. So and I think recently Google just started an initiative on skin cancer and all. And that can be like detrimental to kind of the startups who have developed so much time and effort in growing their company. So how does a startup kind of mitigate the risk from big companies? I know Sigtuple has its own hardware, so I guess that's definitely one point which I thought. Like, do you have any other points which maybe you can add here?
Sure. You see, there is any problem that you can identify in the world, there is a possibility that Google might be solving it. But that has never prevented any startup from ever doing it big, right? If you have a good solution. So focus matters. For a big tech company, putting a dedicated focus on a problem which is not their core expertise is always challenging. And even if they did, even if it was not challenging for them, healthcare is an ocean. There is enough room for a lot of fish, including for the blue whale and for the small fishes. It doesn't matter. So what matters is your own focus on how you solve the problem. And obviously, people like Google get more press. They publish a paper. They say that we can actually detect what do you call? I think the heart conditions from retinal images. There was a paper like this, but then it turned out that they were actually learning the age of the person from the retinal images. And since age is correlated with heart condition, they were thinking that they could actually predict heart conditions. It was not the case. So that is, I mean, this also happened probably because they relied too much on the data and less on the domain expertise. They can buy more data than you can. But do they have the domain expertise? I have listened to a lot of talks from Google in different conferences. Their expertise with the domain is juvenile. That is where because your existence depends on you solving that problem. So nobody can match your insight into this problem. Should not be, rather, let's put it that way. Nobody should be able to match your insights in this particular problem. So even if Google can solve it, let them solve it. Doesn't matter. You remain focused and solve your own problem.
Yeah. So I think rather than putting fingers in too many pies, a startup which is growing up should be focused on one. Focused. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay, audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or put it on the chat box as well. If you have any queries or any questions, please don't be too worried. Okay, I think we have a very shy audience here, but I think coming to that, like when you said that, like you have the MNCs on one hand, and then you have the startup with its own focus on one hand. How do you determine like whether you'd want to collaborate or compete? Is there like, are there cases where you have decided that, okay, collaboration might be the better way out?
You see, so the compete can only come in if you are solving the same problem that big MNC is solving. Then the question of focus is not very important because that MNC already has a focus on it. They might be, the processes might be a little slow. They might take maybe 6 months more or 1 year more to come up with the final solution but ultimately they will. So compete, if you have to compete with an MNC to get into a space, think carefully, especially in the medical space. Collaboration is better because you might be able to provide capabilities which they do not have. And that can lead to a go-to-market channel. It could lead to many other possibilities, right? Competition, while it is possible, be careful. I mean, we have to clearly understand what your strengths are and why do you think that you will be able to produce something better than what the MNC has. There are smart people everywhere on earth. So we have to keep that in mind. We are not special.
Okay, I think that was a great answer. Yeah. And then like coming about like channels, right? Like, because you said that, MNCs can give you access or channel or like work together and all. So how do you determine the best way ahead? Sometimes it can be say B2B, sometimes it can be B2B2C, or sometimes it can be B2C. So how do you determine that?
In healthcare, if you're selling to a hospital, if your solution is meant for a hospital or a lab, it is necessarily B2B. Whereas if you are building something like a point of care, blood testing or whatever, that becomes B2B or B2B2C. So B2C and the channel partners for the two are very different. People who are selling to say a Philips or a GE sells to labs and hospitals. they are not necessarily good at being B2C channel partners. There you need to find different channel partners. So the collaboration that you need to do should definitely depend on what is your target market and whether that company has presence in that area or not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very valuable suggestion. Yeah. So I think maybe like coming so we have been talking about your company a lot, but maybe if it's okay, we can just talk to you about your journey as well. So I think you started with your bachelor's and PhD in IIT, and then after that you kind of moved to this totally different sector. I think your PhD was mostly on electronics, if I'm
Yes.
not wrong. Yeah. So how did you kind of figure out that okay, this is the area where you would be a good fit, or like how did you find that confidence? Yeah.
Good. So I started my career in the semiconductor industry. So I used to write software for design automation, and my PhD was also in that same domain. And in 2007, I had a small startup trying to do this, but it was probably there at the wrong place at the wrong time. So we shut it down in 1.5 years. Then I did a domain shift. I went into web search, Yahoo, big data, web search, uh, machine learning and all that, which was obviously very different from what I used to do earlier. That was possible because both are computer science at the end of the day. And I remained in that field for another, say, 7-8 years. And then came Sigtuple. And as you can well understand, I am a complete rank outsider when it comes to the medical industry. That has its disadvantages because I don't understand many of the things that the doctors say. But it also has an advantage is that I look at a problem with a fresh pair of eyes. I would say most people in Sigtuple look at a problem with a fresh pair of eyes, which people inside the industry may not have thought about. So sometimes it is good for rank outsiders to come in and try to disrupt an industry. They may be possible, they may not be possible. They may not be able to do it. They may be able to do it. They may not be able to do it, but it is worth a try. And if you have allies from within the industry the way we had, it should be possible.
So, I mean, so as you said, like you were like totally outside the industry, but then you had a fresh perspective. But were the people who are like veterans of the industry or the sector initially receptive of this? Like, or did you have to wait for your...
Actually, there, I think the IIT background helped. IIT has its name in India. So fortunately or unfortunately, that helps. So plus people actually were looking forward to artificial intelligence. I can tell you that. Many doctors were actually looking forward to artificial intelligence.
So, I mean, is it because like, I'm just curious, forgive me if it's too upfront. Is it because they're like actually genuinely like aware of the whole usefulness of it, or is it because of a buzzword?
They may not be aware of the nitty-gritty details of how artificial intelligence works, but they think that artificial intelligence can make their jobs simpler, make their lives easier, and improve the end patient outcome. So that is, I mean, that is something which I was very surprised to see, but I did find it in many, many doctors when we started.
Wow. And I think that was way back when AI and ML became like a buzzword, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wow. Okay, thank you so much, Tatha, for your time. We will be closing soon. I think it was an amazing one-to-one discussion. I wish the audience were more forward with their questions, but I guess it was an amazing discussion, and I really enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the main room.